If you can stand up comfortably, please stand up. Feel free to shake your, get going again. Stay standing if you've ever done a media interview. If you have done a media interview, stay standing.
Oh, that's pretty impressive.
So most people in the room have actually been interviewed by the media. Is that correct? Excellent. Stay standing if you walk away from every one of those thinking, yes, nailed it, and it went perfectly.
If you do think that,
We have a few. So there's Rick, Letitia, Angela. Wow. That's the end of the story. How impressive, because, there's an assumption that, that people can be new to this, but I think most of you are very experienced at this, and it's just useful just to get that visual. Thank you. So I know for me, one of the challenges I find when I do media interviews is they ask you real complex questions, and then they say, well, just in a quick soundbite, or I just did the interview with Ella upstairs, one word to describe the eclipse experience. And I'm a psychologist, and emotions to me are full, and I talk a lot about them. So it's very hard to condense anything down to one word, but it's impossible to do that with the eclipse experience because it's so complex. And when I first started researching the eclipse experience, I did so because there was a need to describe it to other people, because it's just so indescribable, it's ineffable. And in my first book, Total Addiction, I interviewed lots of eclipse chasers. We teased out the elements of the eclipse experience, got it all there. And I thought, okay, this will be easier to convey to the media, right? It's so hard. It's really hard. Over the years, I have found that I have condensed it down to a sound bite, and it's actually taken quite a long time to be able to do that. So now you have a sound bite, and it's much easier to then say or start with the sound bite and then expand on. And whenever I try and do an interview, I always try and make sure I get my sound bite in. And if it doesn't crop up or it's not easy, I just throw it in there at the end. So I encourage you to get your own sound bites, whatever that may be for the things that you're trying to communicate with other people. So that's mine. Feel free to use mine as well. So let's imagine that you're sitting there and you get the request in for an interview. So whether it's an email or a telephone call. And we had a really great panel yesterday from the journalist's perspective, and that's fantastic. I learned a lot from that. But usually it's like, hi, I'm so-and-so, I write for so-and-so. I'm doing a story about da-da-da, and I'd love to talk to you about, and if they're really good, they'll say my deadline is. So if you get all that information, so any journalists in the room, most of you actually do this. You're really good. You keep it short, focused, and it's really clear. And so we know how to respond very quickly to you. So that's great. Now, sometimes you get a journalist who has no interest in it. You get on a Zoom call, and I give a lot of time to journalists because I want to convey the experience of totality. So that's what they call me for. But then you have someone, you know that they've just been given the topic, no interest, they haven't done the basic research on it. And it's kind of frustrating because no matter how excited you get, they just don't get it. And it's like, okay, they're not the right person to be able to write a story about the emotional impact of totality. So I've learned over time that that's not the best use of my time. In the past, I would have spent my time trying to convince them, but actually when things are so busy, you just can't. So I try and get a sense of, what are they writing for? Who are they writing for? What's the audience? And if that's the investment of my time, then I go ahead with that. But on the other side of the equation is when you have a journalist who's really interested in it, and you can tell, and they are such a joy to have a conversation with. So, is April here? I mean, you've seen an eclipse, and I think journalists who've seen eclipses are it's just so thrilling to be able to share stories. Jamie Carter. So Jamie's my favorite. And often our conversations go for quite a long time, you know, 2.5 hours was our last one. Because there's a lot to unpack and there's often more things that you want to tease out of there. But the interesting thing is that when I do interviews with journalists who get it, love it, it actually makes me think about things and it helps me generate new ideas and thoughts. So it's actually a really helpful process for everybody. So it's very enjoyable. Now you might have the reason, your reason might be different for doing interviews. So you might need to have something you need to convey, like an event or you know, whatever your community is doing, whatever the purpose is that you're going in to do this, you always have that content. And, you know, it's good practice to have the 6 whys, the what, who, when, where, why, how. And then, but with the content comes the process. And sometimes we don't think about that. So the process is about how you deliver that, really. What's the emotional interaction between you and the journalist? And then there's also the key message. So whenever you come across the request for doing something, you look at your content, but don't forget that you know, what's your overall message? What would you like them to be left with? What message would you like them to be left with? Because that's really good to state at the front and then also at the end. Now, I'm saying this and I don't do this all the time. So don't think that you get it and then it's consistent because it's still a learning process. And so, you know, from yesterday's session, I thought, okay, what would be helpful to know from your perspective about now if you're going to get lots of journalists calling you and making contact about what you're doing for next year. So I thought I'd put my psychology hat on and, you know, welcome to Kate's Couch. And just 3 tips. The first is about managing your physiological reactions. Now, I'm sure all of you know about the flight and flight response, our autonomic system. This is how we experience and interpret the world. So we know we'll get that phone call or we say, oh my goodness, I've got a journalist interview, I've got a media interview. Anxiety raises. And then, you know, you might be, when our anxiety raises, our pace of thinking goes faster. Our clarity can get a little bit lost. And with our pace of thinking, lots of extra thoughts come in there too. What if I'm crap? What if I say something wrong? This train of thought can really get out of control. But it's the physiological response that comes with that too. Now, it's interesting because there's a lot of research that says that there are some people who are more primed to have physiological responses to things like totality. So, for example, any eclipse chasers in the room, can you break out into goosebumps during totality? Put your hand up. Goosebumps. Oh, chicken skin?
Yeah, no, we just didn't hear what you said.
Oh,
Goosebumps.
sometimes it's a cultural thing.
I don't look at my skin during totality.
So there were a few hands up. Hands up if you're someone who can get goosebumps just by talking about something that's exciting. Wow. Okay. Actually, can I take a photo of that? I'm a psychologist. Hands up if you get goosebumps talking about things. Actually, I'm just going to do a video. Pan around. This is goosebumps of just doing everyday life. Hands up if you can do your goosebumps at will. Hands up if you can elicit goosebumps at will. I saw Dawn at the back. James.
On myself?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay. We know who you are now. But yes, on yourself. So some people are just really primed and we can elicit goosebumps by ourselves. Having a certain train of thought, a conversation, you know, some people are just really primed. Other people aren't. So because I'm someone who gets goosebumps all the time. And I always thought everyone did. And some people don't. And also some people are actually just more expressive emotionally. You know, we're a bit more animated when we talk. Other people aren't. They're a bit more suppressed and their emotions are down a little bit. So I can't see the Sweetwater gang. Where are you? Put your hands up. Oh, they left. Okay. Life and soul of the panel yesterday, right? High expressed emotion, that's really good. And that's appealing. When you have someone like that and you're interviewing them, it gives you energy and then like a really good session comes out of that. And so when we have that high arousal, we tend to there's a few strategies that we use. So we either dissociate. So any dissociators in the room, like you give a presentation and you just kind of check out. Yep. Other times you can detach from your emotions. You're still present, you're still thinking, but you can actually just detach. Other times people just suppress everything right down. But the danger of that is it can come across as very monotone. And here's one that I recommend. So it's tapping into your child mode. Now, I won't go too much into the psychology behind this, but most of the time we're in our healthy adult mode, right? We can think very logically, rationally about things. We can dip into our child mode. And that's when we tend to feel a bit more vulnerable about things. Something happens that will trigger us to get into that child mode. When we're doing an interview about something that you have to show a lot of emotion, you can dip into your child mode to use that energy, right? You can use it to your advantage. So that's why when I do interviews, I can actually become quite animated. And when we're talking to children, we tend to do that naturally. We tend to dip into child mode to be able to communicate with them. So it's something that's there. And just remember, you can do that to tap into that energy. So a top psych tip number 2, manage your thoughts. And it's really useful just to think about it in a very simplistic way, that when we think about if we go over the things that happened in the past, that's rumination. That's when we say, God, I was terrible. I was awful. I'm always bad at that. I'll never get this right. So if you recognize that, I won't get you to put your hands up. But people like that tend to be more prone to depression. You can understand why, because you're kind of like stuck in the past and you just kind of get in your train of thought there. The alternative on the other side, if you're future oriented, you have those things of, what if this happens? What if I say something wrong? What if I get misquoted? What if it goes viral for the wrong reasons? So you're oriented in the future. And those people more prone to what? Anxiety. Yeah. Some people are very lucky in that they're prone to both. And in my clinical practice, I get people to say, well, what percentage are you there to there? And how does that work for you? But interesting that there is that space in the middle, which is in the here and now. And that's where it's useful to be and to be grounded in the here and now, because that's where you are not preoccupied with how you did the last time or what if something bad happens. You're just in the moment. And you can do things just before your interview, like, taking a few deep breaths, grounding yourself. So if you're standing up, just feel anchored to the ground, that you're here in that moment. If you're on a chair, just feel the chair underneath you. Notice things around you. So instead of detaching, you can actually just be present. So, and just keep in mind that. So it just helps you to stay in the moment, because when you're in the moment, you're more connected with the emotions and you're more able to then convey that to other people. Make sense? Top psych tip number 3. It's not about you. It's about your message. And, the information can be conveyed on a website or in a flyer. So you have to ask yourself, what different message, what's the difference in you conveying this in person compared to what they can get on an information sheet or on the website? And so don't be preoccupied with how you appear, how you look. Just be you. And it's the information that people are looking for. And you know more about that than the other person. So you don't feel the need to feel like a fraud, because you actually have the information you're trying to convey to other people. You do know what you're talking about. So to summarize, you've got the content and, the 6 whys. And I'm always saying, don't forget the W, don't forget the wow. Think about the process, the energy that you bring to that, but then also the key message as well. Try and make sure that you have that before you go into the session, so you're very clear about what you want them to get out of it, and that helps with your communication. So there you go. Thank you very much.